She wasn't supposed to be anyone's mother. Not for a day, not for an hour, not ever. But that evening, two children stood outside a small bakery window, crying, hungry, and looking at her like she was the last hope they had left in this world. "Can you be our mom, just for one day?" And what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that those two children belonged to one of the most powerful, most dangerous rich men in New York. A man who didn't forgive. A man who didn't forget. A man who would burn the world to the ground for his children. But that night, those children didn't want power. They didn't want protection. They just wanted a mother. If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances touch your heart, subscribe now, because this journey will stay with you long after it ends. Waverly Quinn stood alone inside her tiny bakery on a quiet Brooklyn corner, her hands still dusted with flour, her back aching from a 14-hour day that had barely paid the bills. At 27, life had already taken more from her than it had ever given. 9 foster homes. 2 years on the streets. Debt piling up like a storm cloud she couldn't escape. And yet, this bakery, small, warm, smelling of vanilla and butter, was the only place she had ever been able to call her own. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She reached for the door to lock it, and that's when she saw them. 2 small hands pressed against the glass. A little girl, maybe 7, her cheeks wet with tears, her blue eyes wide with a kind of desperation that doesn't belong to a child. And beside her, a boy. Same age. Same silence. But his face was different. Hard. Controlled. Like he had already learned that crying didn't fix anything. Waverly froze. Kids, alone? At this hour? Her first instinct was simple. Call the police. Step back. Don't get involved. That's what people do in this world. But then the little girl leaned closer to the glass, her lips moving slowly. And Waverly read the words. "Can you be our mom, just for one day?" Something inside her broke. Not cracked, not bent, broke. Because no one had ever asked her that. Not when she was 5, standing in a doorway watching her own mother walk away. Not when she was 10, being passed from one house to another like something unwanted. Not when she was 16, bleeding from her arm and running through the streets alone. No one had ever chosen her. And now, 2 children were. Waverly opened the door. The little girl rushed in instantly, grabbing her hand like she was holding onto life itself. The boy stayed where he was, watching, measuring. "Please," the girl whispered, her voice shaking, "just for today." Waverly knelt down slowly, her heart pounding. "Where are your parents?" The boy finally spoke, his voice quiet, too quiet for a child. "We have a father. Not Dad. Not Papa. A father." And somehow, that said everything. Before Waverly could ask another question, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside the bakery. The door flew open. A large man stepped out, his presence filling the street like something dangerous had just arrived. His eyes scanned everything in seconds. Cold. Precise. Trained. Jennings. Della. Get in the car. Now. The girl tightened her grip on Waverly's hand. The boy didn't move. And then a phone rang. The man answered, listened, then slowly turned, and held the phone out toward Waverly. A voice came through the speaker. Deep. Come. But underneath it, something darker. Who is holding my children? Waverly didn't know the name behind that voice. She didn't know this was a billionaire. A man with power that reached into places most people never even imagined. She only knew one thing. 2 children were holding her hands, like she mattered. I am, she said. Her voice didn't shake, even though her heart was racing. Silence. Not normal silence. The kind of silence where a man decides what you're worth. You have no idea what you've involved yourself in, the voice said slowly. Waverly looked down at the children. The girl, trembling. The boy, pretending he wasn't. What I'm involved in, she replied, is 2 kids standing alone on the street, looking for a mother. Another silence. Longer this time. Heavily protected children, the man replied. A protection team that lets them run away isn't protection, Waverly said softly. It's just money pretending to care. The boy looked up at her. Something shifted in his eyes. Give them to my man. Now. Waverly tightened her grip. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. And somewhere, miles away, a powerful man went completely still. What did you say? I said no, Waverly repeated. They're scared. They're hungry. I'm going to feed them. You can come pick them up at 8. You're giving me terms? I'm giving you your children safe. Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Because for just a second, that cold, powerful voice didn't sound angry. It sounded human. Waverly ended the call and handed the phone back. The man outside stared at her like she had just stepped into something she didn't understand. Maybe she had. But she didn't care. She led the children inside. The warmth of the bakery wrapped around them. The smell of fresh cookies filled the air. The little girl refused to let go of her hand. The boy hesitated, then followed. And for the first time in years, that empty little bakery started to feel like a home. But outside, across the street, the black SUV didn't leave. And inside it, a man who controlled half the city was already on his way. And this time, he wasn't coming as a father. He was coming as something far more dangerous. Waverly moved behind the counter, gently guiding the children toward the small kitchen table like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sit, she said softly, her voice calm in a way she didn't quite understand herself. I'll get you something warm. The little girl, Della, climbed onto the chair but didn't let go of Waverly's hand until the very last second, like even a moment of distance might make her disappear. Jennings sat across from her, straight-backed, alert, his eyes scanning everything. Not curious, careful. Waverly poured 2 mugs of warm milk, her hand steady even though her thoughts were anything but. She had just told a powerful stranger, no. A man whose voice carried the kind of control that didn't come from money alone. And yet, here she was. Setting cookies in front of his children like this was just another ordinary evening. Drink, she said, placing the mugs down. It'll help. Della wrapped both hands around the mug immediately, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for it. She took a sip, then another, her shoulders slowly relaxing. Jennings didn't move right away. He stared at the milk, then at Waverly, then back at the milk. Go on, Waverly said gently. No one's taking it from you. Something flickered in his eyes. He picked up the mug, took a careful sip, and then, just for a second, his eyes closed. Waverly saw it. That tiny shift. Like a child who had been holding something heavy for too long, and finally set it down. Della wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, a little chocolate smudge already forming at the corner of her lips. Miss Waverly, she whispered, leaning closer, your milk tastes better than at home. Waverly felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't the milk. It was the feeling. Warm, safe, simple. The kind of thing money couldn't buy. Across the table, Jennings said nothing. But he didn't pull away. And that meant everything. The kitchen stayed quiet for a while. Just the soft clink of mugs, the faint hum of the fridge, the distant sound of cars passing outside. Ordinary sounds. But for Waverly, It felt like something she had never truly experienced before. A moment that didn't hurt. Della suddenly reached into her coat pocket, her small fingers searching carefully before pulling out a folded photograph. She placed it on the table like it was something sacred. "This is my mama," she said. Waverly leaned closer. A woman with soft brown hair, kind eyes, smiling in a way that felt real, not forced. There was life in that smile. Love. "My mama's name was Lone," Della whispered, her finger tracing the photo. "Papa keeps all her pictures locked away, but I took this one." Waverly didn't speak. She just watched. The way Della's finger kept moving over the image again and again, like she was afraid the memory might fade if she stopped. "Do I look like her?" Della asked quietly. Waverly looked from the photo to the girl. The same eyes. The same softness. "Yes," she said gently. "You do." Della smiled. Not a sad smile. A real one. And it lit up her whole face. But Jennings. He didn't smile. He stared at the photograph, his expression distant. Not longing. Not curiosity. Distance. "Do you want to see?" Waverly asked him softly. He shook his head. Slow. Firm. "I don't remember her," he said. His voice didn't break. But it didn't need to. "I don't remember her face, or her voice," he continued. "I don't even remember what she smelled like." The words hung in the air. Heavy. "That's the worst part," he added quietly. Waverly felt her throat tighten. Because she knew that feeling. Too well. "I don't remember my mother either," she said after a moment. Jennings looked up. "But I remember what it felt like to want to remember," she continued. "And sometimes that's enough to know you loved them." Jennings didn't answer. But he didn't look away either. And something, just a little, shifted between them. Waverly stood up suddenly, needing to break the weight in the room before it swallowed them whole. "All right," she said, forcing a small smile. "How about something better than sitting around thinking sad thoughts?" Della perked up instantly. "What?" Waverly reached for the flour, eggs, and sugar. "I'm going to teach you how to bake." Della jumped off her chair. "Really? Really?" Flour dusted the counter as Waverly began to knead the dough, her movements smooth, practiced. Della rushed in, immediately grabbing flour and tossing it everywhere like it was snow. "Whoa, slow down," Waverly laughed softly. "You're doing it wrong," Jennings said from behind them. But there was something new in his voice. Not cold. Not distant. Almost normal. "Then come show her how to do it right," Waverly said without looking at him. A pause. 3 seconds. Then Jennings stepped forward. He stood beside his sister, his small hands pressing into the dough, serious and focused. Waverly guided him gently. "Like this, press, fold again." He followed exactly. Careful. Precise. Della, on the other hand, was making a complete mess. Flour on her cheeks, her nose, even her eyelashes. Jennings glanced at her. Then, for the first time, he laughed. Just a little. But enough. Waverly felt it hit her chest like something fragile and beautiful all at once. Della blinked, confused. "What?" "Your nose," Jennings said, still smiling faintly. Della crossed her eyes trying to see it. Then burst into giggles. And just like that, the kitchen filled with laughter. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't ask permission. The kind that heals something broken. Waverly stepped back for a moment, watching them. 2 children. Covered in flour. Smiling. And for the first time, her bakery didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something she had never had before. A home. But then, from the corner of the room, a voice cut through quietly. Tinsley. Waverly turned. Tinsley stood by the window, her face pale. "What is it?" Waverly asked. Tinsley didn't answer right away. She just pointed outside. Waverly walked closer, slowly, her heart beginning to pound again. Across the street, a black car sat still, engine running, windows dark, and inside, someone was watching, not moving, not leaving, just waiting. Waverly felt it then. That quiet shift, that reminder, this moment, this warmth, this peace. It didn't belong to a simple world. It belonged to something dangerous. And whoever was in that car wasn't just watching the bakery. They were watching her. Waverly didn't say anything at first. She just stood there beside Tinsley, her eyes fixed on the car across the street. Still, silent, watching. Her heartbeat slowed instead of racing, like her body had already decided something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. "He's here," she said quietly. Tinsley glanced at her. "You don't know that." Waverly's gaze didn't shift. "I do. There was something about it. Not the car. Not the darkness behind the glass. The feeling. The kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself." Behind her, Della laughed again, her small hands clapping as flowers scattered across the counter. The sound was bright, innocent, completely untouched by whatever was waiting outside. Waverly closed her eyes for just a second. Then she turned back. "Keep going," she said gently to the kids. "Finish your cookies." Della grinned. "Look, Miss Waverly, mine is a heart." It was uneven, a little lopsided, the edges too thick on one side. "Perfect. That's beautiful," Waverly said. Jennings reached over, quietly adjusting the shape without making a big deal of it. Della beamed at him like he'd just done something magical. And Waverly, she memorized it, because something told her this moment wouldn't last. Time moved strangely after that, slow and fast at the same time. The cookies went into the oven. The warmth filled the kitchen again. The laughter softened into quiet conversation. And every few seconds, Waverly felt it. That pull. That reminder. Someone was still out there. Waiting. At exactly 7:45, the bell above the bakery door rang. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a soft chime. But everything inside the room stilled. Tinsley stopped moving. Della looked up. Jennings turned his head slowly toward the front. And Waverly. She already knew. She walked out from behind the counter, step by step, until she reached the front of the bakery. And there he was, Barrett Consincade. He didn't look like the voice. That was the first thing that struck her. No leather jacket. No visible threat. No raised voice. Just a man. Tall. Clean. Dressed like he had just walked out of a boardroom. But his eyes. They weren't cold. They were searching. Wild, almost. Like a man who had been holding his breath for too long. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then his gaze moved past her. To the kitchen. To the children. And everything about him changed. He crossed the room in 3 long steps and dropped to his knees between them. Della. Jennings. His hands moved quickly, checking them. Shoulders. Arms. Faces. Not rough. Not controlled. Shaking. Did anyone hurt you? Are you okay? Tell me. I'm okay, Papa, Della said, smiling, her face still dusted with flour. We made cookies. Jennings didn't pull away when his father checked him. But he didn't lean in either. He just stayed still, letting it happen. Like he was used to this kind of moment. Barrett's hands slowed. His breathing steadied, just a little. Then he stood up. And when he turned back toward Waverly, the softness was gone. Replaced. Locked away. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked. His voice was calm again, but sharper now. "I gave them food," Waverly replied evenly, "and a place to sit. You kept them here. They came here." "They are not children you take in from the street," he said. "They were standing on the street," she answered. Silence. "Not empty. Heavy. You brought them into an unsecured place," Barrett continued. "No protection. No control." Waverly crossed her arms, her voice steady. "They needed warmth, not security cameras." Barrett took a step closer. He was taller than her. Broader. Built like someone used to being obeyed. "You don't understand the world they live in." Waverly didn't step back. "I understand the world they feel." That landed. She saw it. A flicker. Small, but real. "They're lonely," she said softly. "And no amount of money fixes that." Barrett's jaw tightened. His eyes shifted, just for a second. Then he turned away. "Della. Jennings. We're leaving." Della slid off her chair, but instead of going to him right away, she ran back to the counter. She grabbed something, then turned and hurried back. A cookie. The heart-shaped one. Slightly burnt at the edges. Uneven icing across the top. She held it up with both hands. "I made this for you, Papa." Barrett looked down at it. Didn't take it right away. Just stared. Like it was something fragile. Or dangerous. Waverly watched his face carefully. The smallest crack appeared. Then he reached out. Took it. Gently. Too gently for a man like him. Della smiled, satisfied. Jennings stepped closer now, standing beside his father. Barrett didn't say anything else. He took Della's hand, gave Jennings a slight nod, and turned toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped, still not looking back. "Thank you," he said quietly. 2 simple words. But they didn't sound like something he said often. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him. The street swallowed the moment. Tinsley let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "What was that?" Waverly didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at the door. Because something didn't feel finished. And then, through the glass, she saw him. Barrett. Standing beside the car. Speaking to the man from earlier. His expression different now. Controlled. Cold again. Waverly couldn't hear everything. But she caught enough. Find out everything. Who she is. Before morning. Her stomach tightened. Not fear. Not exactly. Something heavier. He wasn't just a father. And whatever world he lived in, it had just reached her doorstep. The car door opened. Barrett got in. And just before the window closed, for one brief second, his eyes lifted, met hers, and held. Not cold, not warm, something in between, something unreadable. Then the window slid shut, the car pulled away, and the quiet returned. But this time, it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like the beginning of something she couldn't take back. The silence inside the bakery stretched longer than it should have. Not empty, not peaceful, just heavy. Like something had shifted in the air and hadn't settled yet. Tinsley walked slowly toward the door, peeking through the glass as the car disappeared at the end of the street. Then she turned back. "You realize," she said carefully, "that wasn't just some rich dad picking up his kids." Waverly didn't answer right away. She was still standing where he had left her, her hands resting lightly on the counter, flour still clinging to her fingers. "I know," she said quietly. Tinsley studied her face. And you still told him no? Waverley let out a slow breath. They asked me first. That was it. That was the truth she couldn't shake. Two small voices had chosen her. Before power, before money, before fear had a chance to speak. Tinsley shook her head softly. You're either really brave, or you just walked straight into something dangerous. Waverley gave a faint smile. I've lived through worse than a man with a nice suit and a quiet voice. She turned away from the door and walked back toward the kitchen. The warmth was still there. The smell of cookies lingered in the air. But it didn't feel the same anymore. The chairs were empty now. The flour on the counter, still scattered from small hands that had been laughing just minutes ago. Waverley reached out and brushed her fingers across the surface. She didn't wipe it clean. Didn't want to. Like if she left it there, the moment wouldn't fully disappear. Tinsley leaned against the doorway. So what now? Waverley looked down at the tray. One cookie remained. The heart-shaped one. Not the one Della had given to her father. Another one. Messy. Uneven. Imperfect. But full of effort. She picked it up slowly. I don't know, she admitted. And that was rare for her. Because Waverley always had a plan. Survive. Work. Keep going. Simple. But this wasn't simple. This was something that reached deeper than survival. That night, the bakery closed later than usual. Not because there was more work to do, but because Waverley wasn't ready to leave. She moved slowly, wiped the counters, rearranged trays that didn't need rearranging, checked the oven twice. Anything to delay the moment she'd step outside. Tinsley watched her for a while, then finally grabbed her coat. You're waiting, she said. Waverley didn't deny it. For what? She hesitated. Then, quietly, I don't know. Tinsley studied her for a second longer, then nodded once. Lock up when you're done. And she left. The bell above the door chimed softly behind her. Waverley was alone again. The quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one felt expectant, like something hadn't finished speaking yet. She finally turned off the lights in the kitchen and walked toward the front. The street outside was darker now. Quieter. Most of the shops had closed. The city had settled into that late-night rhythm where everything slowed just a little. Waverley reached for the door. And stopped. Across the street. The black car was back. Not parked the same way. Not hidden. Just there. Under the streetlight. Clear. Visible. Waiting. Her heart didn't race. It steadied. Because now, there was no guessing. He was there. She didn't open the door. Didn't wave. Didn't move. She just stood behind the glass. Looking. And after a few seconds, the driver's side window rolled down slightly. Just enough. A shape moved inside. She couldn't see his full face. But she knew it was him. The way he sat. The stillness. The control. And then, nothing. No signal. No gesture. No words. Just silence. Two people, separated by a street and a pane of glass, looking at each other like there was something neither one knew how to say. Waverley felt it then. Not fear. Not even caution. Something else. Recognition. Like she understood something about him, without knowing why. A man who didn't know how to walk inside. A man who stayed outside, even when he wanted to step closer. Time passed. A minute. Maybe two. Neither of them moved. And then, the car engine shifted. Soft. Low. The window rolled up. And slowly, the car pulled away. No rush. No noise. Just gone. Waverley stood there for a long moment after, looking at the empty street. Then finally, she locked the door. The click echoed louder than usual. She turned and walked back through the bakery, past the counter, past the table, past the flour still scattered across the surface. She stopped there again, her fingers brushing it lightly. And this time, she didn't smile, because something had changed. This wasn't just about two children anymore. This was about a man who didn't know how to stay. A man who watched from a distance. A man who had looked at her, not like she was nothing, but like she was something he didn't understand. Waverley turned off the last light, stepped outside, locked the door behind her, and started walking home. The night air was cool, the streets quiet, but her thoughts louder than ever. She had spent her whole life learning how to survive alone. Never depend. Never expect. Never stay where things could be taken away. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt something pulling her in the opposite direction. Toward something uncertain. Toward something complicated. Toward people who didn't belong in her world, but somehow felt like they did. 4 blocks later, she reached her apartment. Small, simple, familiar. She stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her hand slipped into her apron pocket without thinking, and she froze. There was something inside. She pulled it out slowly. A small folded piece of paper. She didn't remember putting it there. Her fingers tightened as she opened it. Inside, a child's handwriting. Uneven. Careful. Miss Waverley, your cookies are the best in the world. I miss you. A small pause. Then another line. Jennings misses you too. He just won't say it. And at the bottom, a heart. Drawn over and over again. Pressed so hard into the paper it almost tore through. Waverley sat down slowly on the edge of her bed. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Too still. She read the words again. And again. Her chest tightened. Not painfully, but deeply. Because those weren't just words. They were attachment. Trust. Something fragile. Something dangerous. She folded the paper carefully. Held it for a moment longer. Then pressed it gently against her chest. And for the first time that night, her eyes closed. Not in fear. Not in exhaustion. But in something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. But somewhere across the city, in a much larger, colder place, a man sat awake in the dark, holding a small, uneven cookie in his hand. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what to do next. Morning came quietly. Not peaceful, just quiet in the way a night full of thoughts finally runs out of things to say. Waverley was already awake before the sun had fully risen. She stood in the bakery kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in dough, moving through the motions she had repeated every day for years. Press, fold, turn, press, fold, turn. The rhythm usually grounded her. Usually. But today, her mind kept slipping. Back to the note. Back to the children. Back to a man sitting in the dark, holding something as simple as a cookie like it meant more than it should. You're not even looking at what you're doing. Tinsley's voice cut through gently. Waverley blinked, realizing she had been kneading the same section of dough for too long. I am, she said, though it didn't sound convincing. Tinsley leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You didn't sleep. Waverley didn't answer. She didn't need to. It was written all over her face. Tinsley watched her for a second, then sighed. So, are we going to talk about the part where a powerful rich man now knows everything about you? Waverley's hands slowed. Or are we pretending this is just another normal morning? Waverly wiped her hands on her apron. He hasn't done anything. Yet. The word hung there. Heavy. Tinsley stepped closer. You don't just tell a man like that no, and walk away like nothing happened. Waverly looked down at the dough again. I didn't walk away. Tinsley raised an eyebrow. No, you stayed, she said quietly. That's what worries me. The bell above the door chimed softly as the first customer of the morning stepped in. The conversation ended. But the tension didn't. Hours passed. Bread sold. Coffee poured. Small talk exchanged. Life continued. But underneath it, Waverly felt it. That quiet shift again. Like something had already been set in motion. Around midday, Tinsley glanced toward the window. Then froze. Waverly didn't look right away. She didn't need to. Still there, Tinsley said under her breath. Waverly finally turned. The same black car. Parked across the street. Same spot. Same silence. Not hiding anymore. Not leaving either. Just present. How long? Waverly asked. Since we opened. Waverly studied it for a moment. Then turned back to the counter. Let it stay. Tinsley blinked. That's your plan. He's not here to hurt me, Waverly said quietly. How do you know that? Waverly paused. Because she didn't. Not completely. But something inside her refused to believe that man, the one who had dropped to his knees in panic for his children, was only what the world probably saw him as. I just know, she said finally. Tinsley shook her head. You've got a dangerous kind of faith. Waverly gave a faint smile. It's the only kind I've ever had. By the second day, the car was still there. By the third, nothing changed. Same place. Same silence. It became part of the background. Like a shadow that didn't move. Customers didn't notice. Life kept going. But Waverly noticed. Every time she glanced at the window, it was there. Watching. Waiting. And strangely, it didn't feel threatening. It felt hesitant. Like someone standing outside a door they weren't sure they had the right to open. On the fourth day, Tinsley finally said what had been building. This is not normal. Waverly was wiping down the counter slowly. I know. He's watching you. Or the bakery. Or both, Tinsley added. Waverly didn't argue. Because both felt true. That night, after closing, Waverly lingered again. Not as long as before. But long enough. When she finally stepped to the front, the car was still there. But this time, she could see more clearly. The streetlight angled just right. Through the windshield. A face. Barrett. No suit jacket this time. No phone in his hand. Just sitting there. Alone. Looking at the bakery. Looking at her. Their eyes met again. No words. No gestures. Just stillness. And in that stillness, Waverly understood something deeper. He wasn't watching her like a threat. He was watching like someone trying to understand something they had never had. Warmth. Normal. A place that didn't ask anything from him except to sit and stay. Her chest tightened. Because she knew that feeling. Wanting something simple, and not knowing how to reach for it. The moment stretched. Longer this time. And then, the engine started. The car pulled away. Again. Always leaving. Waverly stood there for a long time after. The empty street in front of her. The quiet pressing in. Until finally, she turned off the lights. Locked up. And walked home. The next morning. At exactly 6 a.m. Her phone rang. Waverly frowned, wiping her hands quickly before picking it up. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. But something, a quiet instinct she couldn't explain, made her answer. Hello. Silence. Then, a small voice. Careful. Quiet. Miss Waverly? Waverly froze. Her heart skipped. Jennings. A pause. Like he was surprised she recognized him. Yes. She sat down slowly on the chair beside the counter. You're calling early, she said softly. I'm sorry, he replied quickly. I got your number from the phone. Waverly's voice gentled. It's okay. Are you all right? Is Della okay? We're okay. Silence. But not empty. He was thinking, gathering something. Today is Saturday, he said finally. Waverly's fingers tightened around the phone. She already knew what was coming, but she let him say it. Papa said he would take us somewhere, Jennings continued. But he says that a lot. The words were calm. Too calm. He gets busy, he added. Important calls. Meetings. Things that matter. A small pause. Then, he forgets. Waverly closed her eyes. Because she heard it. Not anger. Not blame. Just disappointment that had learned how to stay quiet. I just wanted to ask, Jennings said, his voice dropping slightly. If you're free today. Waverly didn't hesitate. I am. Another pause. This one softer. Like relief. If he doesn't come, Jennings said, can we come to you? Waverly swallowed. Her chest tightening again. You don't need a second option, she said gently. But Jennings didn't respond right away. Because he already knew better. Finally. Just in case, he whispered. Waverly looked out the window. Across the street. The black car was gone. And for the first time in days, that absence felt louder than its presence. She brought the phone closer to her ear. I'll be here, she said softly. And as the line went quiet, somewhere deep inside her, she felt it again. That pull. That choice she couldn't avoid much longer. Because this time, it wasn't just about being there for one day. It was about what it meant. Waverly didn't hang up right away. Neither did Jennings. They stayed there, connected by silence. The kind of silence where something important is trying to be said, but neither side knows how to begin. Jennings, she said softly, is there something else? A small breath came through the phone. Yes. She waited. Last time, she had learned, he needed time. Last night, he began, then stopped. Waverly leaned back slightly in her chair, her voice gentle. I'm listening. Another pause. Then, Papa came to our room. Waverly's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. But we weren't there. Her heart skipped. Where were you? In the sitting room, Jennings said quietly. Me and Della. Why? Silence. Longer this time. Waverly didn't interrupt, because she already felt the weight behind the answer. We didn't want to wait anymore. The words landed softly, but they cut deep. Every night we wait, he continued, his voice calm in a way no 7-year-old should sound. Sometimes he comes late. Sometimes he doesn't come at all. Waverly closed her eyes. And last night, Jennings went on, Della said, what if we don't wait this time? His voice dropped just a little. So we didn't. Waverly could picture it. 2 small beds. Empty. A quiet room. And a man standing in the doorway. Too late. What happened when he saw? She asked gently. I don't know, Jennings replied. We were already asleep. But his voice said something else. He had imagined it. thought about it, felt it. We just didn't want to be the only ones waiting anymore, he added. Waverly swallowed, her throat tightening, because she understood that kind of quiet decision, the kind that didn't come from anger, but from being tired of hoping. You did something very brave, she said softly. Jennings didn't answer right away, and when he did, his voice was even quieter. I don't feel brave. Waverly's eyes opened slowly. Sometimes, she said, bravery doesn't feel like anything at all. A faint sound on the other end, like he was thinking about that. Then, I have to go, Jennings said quickly, before someone sees. Jennings, I'll remember, he added softly, that you said you'd be there. The line went dead. Waverly sat still for a long moment, the phone still pressed to her ear. The bakery around her was quiet again, but something inside her wasn't. She stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked out. The street felt different now. Not empty, not calm, waiting. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone rang again. This time, the number wasn't unknown. Waverly stared at it for half a second, then answered. Barrett. Silence. Not long, but heavy. Today is Saturday, he said. His voice was different. Not sharp, not cold. Something underneath it, strained. Yes, Waverly replied. I promised them I would take them somewhere. A pause. Then, I don't know where to take them. Waverly blinked. That wasn't what she expected. I don't know what children like, he continued, his voice low. I don't know what they expect. The words came slowly, like they cost him something to say. Waverly leaned against the counter. They don't expect much, she said gently. They just want you to show up. Another silence. Longer this time. I need you to come with us. The request landed quietly, but it carried weight. They listen to you, he added. They trust you. Waverly didn't answer immediately, because she heard what he didn't say. I don't know how to do this alone. Where? She asked finally. You already know the bakery address, he replied. A faint shift in his tone. Almost something softer. Be ready at 9. The call ended. Waverly stood there, staring at the phone in her hand. Tinsley walked in from the front, wiping her hands. That sounded serious. Waverly looked up. He wants me to go with them. Tinsley froze. With him? With them? Tinsley let out a slow breath. That's not the same thing. No, it wasn't. Waverly walked into the small back room, pulling off her apron slowly. Her hands moved without thinking, washing the flour away, changing her shirt, tying her hair back again. Not for him. Not really. For them. At exactly 9 o'clock, a car pulled up outside the bakery. Waverly stepped out. The morning air was cool, quiet, different from the night before. Barrett was in the driver's seat. Not a driver. Not security. Just him. His hands rested tight on the wheel. His posture straight. Controlled. But his eyes. They flickered toward her the moment she stepped outside. And something in them shifted. In the back seat, Della waved wildly the second she saw her. Miss Waverly. Jennings sat beside her. Still. But when Waverly caught his gaze, he smiled. Small. Brief. But real. Waverly felt it hit her chest. She walked toward the car. Opened the back door. Della immediately reached for her hand. You came, she said, like it wasn't something she had doubted, but something she had hoped for anyway. I said I would, Waverly replied softly. She slid into the seat beside them. The door closed. The car pulled away. And for the first time, there were no bodyguards. No distance. Just four people in the same space, trying to figure something out. The drive was quiet at first. The city moving around them. Shops. Streets. People living their lives. Ordinary. And yet, inside the car, nothing felt ordinary. Barrett's hands stayed tight on the wheel. His eyes fixed on the road, like he was concentrating on something far more difficult than driving. "Where are we going?" Della asked, her voice bright. Barrett hesitated. Then, "Somewhere with space," he said. "Not a plan. Not a destination. Just an attempt." Waverly glanced at him. He wasn't used to this. Not this kind of decision. Not this kind of responsibility. And for the first time, he looked unsure. Jennings leaned slightly closer to Waverly. "Is that a good place?" he whispered. Waverly smiled gently. "It can be." The car moved forward, the city slowly giving way to something more open, more free. And as the silence settled again, Waverly realized something. This wasn't just a day out. This was a man trying to step into a role he had avoided for too long, trying to reach children who had already started to stop waiting. And somehow, she had become part of that moment, whether she was ready or not. Barrett finally spoke again, still looking at the road. "Tell me what they like." His voice was quieter now, less controlled, more human. Waverly looked at the children, at their faces, at the way they leaned closer without realizing it, and she understood. This wasn't about places. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about doing things right. It was about one thing. "Stay," she said softly. Barrett's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "What?" "Whatever you choose," Waverly said, her voice calm, steady. "Just don't leave halfway through." The car fell silent again. But this silence was different, because for the first time, Barrett didn't have an answer. And he didn't know if he could promise it. Barrett didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, but something inside him had shifted. The words lingered. "Just don't leave." Simple, but heavier than anything he had been told in years. The car rolled forward, the city slowly opening into a quieter stretch where the noise faded and the sky seemed a little wider. Della pressed her face to the window, her voice full of wonder. "Look, there's water." Barrett followed her gaze and nodded. "We'll stop there." No hesitation this time. No second guessing. Just a choice made and held. He pulled the car over near a quiet shoreline where the wind moved gently across the water. Not crowded. Not loud. Just space and time. Della jumped out first, her laughter carried by the breeze. Jennings stepped out more slowly, scanning the area before settling, his shoulders easing just a little. Waverly stepped out last. Barrett remained by the driver's door for a moment longer, watching, measuring something inside himself. Then he closed the door and walked toward them. Della ran straight to the edge, her shoes sinking slightly into the sand. "Papa, come here." Barrett hesitated. Just a second. Then he walked forward, each step slower than it should have been, like he was learning how to enter a world he had built walls around. Jennings crouched near the sand, picking it up in his hands, letting it fall again. Waverly stood nearby, quietly observing. Not leading. Not pushing. Just there. Della grabbed Barrett's hand and pulled him closer to the water. "Take your shoes off," she said. Barrett looked down at his polished shoes. Then at the water. Then at her. "They'll get dirty," he said. Della frowned. So, the question was simple, but it carried everything. Barrett paused, then slowly bent down, untied his shoes, took them off, and stepped forward, barefoot. The cold sand pressed beneath his feet, unfamiliar, uncomfortable, real. Della laughed and splashed lightly at the edge. Jennings glanced at his father, then reached down and handed him a small plastic bucket he had found nearby. No words, just a gesture. Barrett looked at it, then at his son, and took it. Awkward at first, he crouched down beside him, scooped sand, tried to shape it. It collapsed. Jennings didn't laugh. He just reached over, adjusted the edges quietly, like it was normal, like this was something they did all the time. And for a moment, it almost felt like it was. Waverly watched from a distance, her arms wrapped lightly around herself. She saw it. The effort. The quiet struggle. The way Barrett didn't rush. Didn't check his phone. Didn't look away. He stayed. Minutes turned into an hour. The sandcastle grew uneven but steady. Della decorated it with shells. Jennings fixed the structure carefully. Barrett followed their lead, learning, trying, and for the first time, there was no distance between them, just a father and his children. Later, they sat together on the sand. Della leaned against Waverly, her energy finally slowing. Jennings sat close to his father, not touching, but not distant either. Barrett looked out at the water. Quiet. Then, "My wife," he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying something deeper. "She used to bring them places like this." Waverly didn't interrupt. "She said moments mattered more than everything else," he continued. "I didn't understand that." His hands rested in the sand now. No longer tight. No longer controlled. "I thought protecting them meant keeping them safe from everything." He glanced at Jennings, then at Della. "I didn't realize. I was keeping myself away from them too." Silence followed. But it wasn't heavy. It was honest. Della shifted slightly, looking up at him. "You're here now," she said simply. Barrett's expression softened. Just enough. Jennings looked at him too. And this time, he didn't look away. Barrett took a slow breath. Then, carefully, uncertainly, he placed his hand over Jennings' shoulder. The boy didn't move, didn't pull away, just stayed. And that was enough. Waverly felt her chest tighten, because she understood what was happening. Not something loud, not dramatic, something quiet, something real. A beginning. Barrett turned slightly toward her. "I should have come inside," he said. Waverly shook her head gently. "You came when it mattered." He held her gaze for a moment, and for the first time, there was no wall in his eyes, just a man, trying to do better. The sun dipped lower, the light softening across the water. Time moved without pressure, without fear. And when it was time to leave, no one rushed. Back in the car, Della fell asleep against Waverly's shoulder. Jennings leaned back, his hand resting lightly against his father's arm. Barrett drove in silence. But this silence was different. It wasn't distance. It was peace. When they reached the bakery, the car stopped. Waverly gently shifted Della, helping her settle back. Jennings stepped out first, then paused. He looked at Waverly, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his voice. "Can I call you Mom, someday?" Waverly's breath caught. Her heart, full and fragile at once. She knelt down in front of him. "You can call me whatever feels right," she said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere." Jennings nodded. This time, he believed it. Barrett stepped out of the car. He didn't say much. Didn't need to. He simply stood there for a moment, then gave a small, quiet nod. Respect. Gratitude. Something unspoken, but understood. As the car pulled away again, Waverly stood there watching. But this time, it didn't feel like something leaving. It felt like something beginning. Because love wasn't about having everything. It wasn't about money, or power, or control. It was about showing up, staying, choosing someone again and again, even when it's hard. And sometimes, the poorest heart holds the richest kind of love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and stay with us. And tell me, where are you watching from today?